I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce Gordon Reichert. He's from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, as was mentioned before. Gordon, he's been working for the government for 5 years now, and he has a master's degree in agronomy. And he's here to talk about the potentials of hemp for the Canadian farm and marketplace. So here's Gordon.
Just want to make sure this thing's on. Thank you, Martin. I'd like to say thank you to all of you, to our distinguished guests, both from the Ukraine and from Poland. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada got involved in hemp because of work primarily that was done by Joe Strobel and Jeff Keim, Hempline Incorporated out of Ontario, and that started in 1994. We have a publication that is entitled The Biweekly Bulletin, and every 2 weeks we write articles that could vary from ozone depletion to durum wheat to hemp. We had no idea when this article was written that we would have such positive response from it. So much so that I think about 50% of the communication that I receive either via email or telephone is in response to questions about hemp. The article itself is really just a basic overview of hemp from its history to what has been going on leading up to hemp in Canada during the 30s, etc., and what had been going on in other parts of the world as well. From information that I could get from other people, that being private enterprise on prices, I put together a very not comprehensive, just a very brief summary actually of gross returns, and I emphasized the fact that was gross returns because there were a lot of questions that were unanswered as a result of that, and that was part of the reason why there was such a diverse calling seeking more information on this. So we continued to work on the particular area. As a result of that, the Symposium in Germany last year, the Bioresource Symposium, I was asked to give a presentation there on the status of industrial hemp in Canada, and as a result they published this particular document. Certainly, and in my mind, is a very good document. There's about 700 pages in here. About a third of the papers in it as well are in German. The others are in English. There has been a summary written by Dr. Giraud Laison, which is posted on the World Wide Web if anybody is looking for that. And I have the summary as well. Just have to remember where I put it in amongst all these papers. I had a whole raft of them actually. The Bioresource Symposium itself had, specifically for hemp, had 42 exhibitors. There were 7 research and other educational organizations at this symposium. There were 58 invited speakers from 13 different countries, and quite surprisingly too, there's quite a few faces that I see here in this room that were also in Germany at this particular symposium that I'm referring to. It was broken up into 4 categories, or 4 days actually. The first day it was on the status reports from various countries around the world. Second day, the hemp plant breeding, cultivation, and harvesting. Third day was the hemp fiber processing and products. Just from that breakdown, I can firmly say that this particular reference, and I like to refer to it as a reference because I go to it quite often, because the papers that were given there are up to date on the research that has been going on in hemp in all areas, whether it be the breeding or the oils aspect. Quite a very good reference material. With that, I'll leave it as far as the Bioresource Symposium is, and I'll continue on then with the status of industrial hemp in Canada. Now, Jack showed a particular slide, and I'm going to put it on as well. Because I think this is the reason why people are looking at hemp. There are many potential products that various researchers and developers have been, of course, working on, whether it be from the bast fibers, from the herds, seeds for either the hemp oil, for edible oil, or even from the industrial side of it, the seed cake itself, and that all put together, there's obviously various regions within Canada that some of this is going to be very applicable to, or at least researchers are looking at the potential of applicability. What are some of the motivating factors behind having industrial hemp? Some of the more predominant factors, of course, are the supply and cost of traditional raw materials, and a very particular example comes to mind in the pulp and paper area. Pulp prices, at least for softwood premium pulp in eastern U.S., in October reached record levels. And as a result of that, researchers are looking at alternate sources for fiber, for pulp. We have trends in Canadian agriculture. Farmers are all too aware of the fact that the crow rate has been eliminated. There's also reduction in participation from various organizations in what some deem to be called subsidies, but those are gradually disappearing, and as a result, farmers are wanting to find more diverse crops, something that will give them a cash flow constantly. Nobody likes to go broke, obviously. There are also the environmental considerations that are taken into concern, and some of the information that had been mentioned or will be spoken on later is the detoxification effects of hemp. And of course, the other thing too is the job creation and environmental benefits that come along with that too. Now, as the law stands in Canada, hemp can legally be grown. However, you must have a license to grow it. The license restricts you to research purposes only. It is also under the strict supervision of the authorities, both from the Ministry of Health, because they issue the license. The RCMP have the option of sampling a crop when it's in the field to determine the THC level of it. And Canada, with this particular law regarding hemp, has no dropout exclusion, and that is that you cannot, with a research license, recoup any part of your costs. You cannot take the fiber, any part of the refined plant, the seed or the oil, after it's been taken from the field, refine it, and then sell that portion. It's specifically for research only. And others in the industry have obviously voiced their concern about that. They would like to, of course, see a different development. But as it stands, doesn't matter which way you look at it, that's still what you're going to get for your crop from a research perspective. That's from a monetary value. Certainly you're going to gain a lot more from it, from determining what the yields are, how it could be applied, where it could be applied, who's interested in working with it, how it could be used. But to a farmer, this is really what it comes down to. Am I going to make money? Can I make money? How much? There are, of course, rapidly changing circumstances, worldwide changes. Just as of late, In let's take Europe, for instance. Germany is now, under their law, able to grow hemp, the farmers there. France, of course, has been growing it. The UK has been growing it for some time. Eastern Europe has been growing it. They never did criminalize it in the first place. Canada, since 1994, as Martin had mentioned in his overview, the Hempline Incorporated were the first successful applicants in nearly 40 years to grow the crop. The biweekly bulletin, of course, put a lot more emphasis on that. And it's been more of a proactive approach. This is an area where we're finding people from entrepreneurs, private industry, and farmers are coming to us and are asking questions regarding it. It's certainly not a government-driven initiative. And this is where a lot of the impetus is coming from, is from the private sector. Just to reiterate what I had said earlier, this industrial hemp in Canada, 1994, 10 acres were grown. Certainly not a lot by any standard, but a milestone as far as Canada was concerned. In 1995, we had a 350% increase. We went from 10 acres to 35. In 1996, there have been people who have constantly been saying that they are going to be applying for commercial scale, or at least they anticipate commercial application. They said that in 94, they said it in 95, they're saying it in 96, and I think we'll certainly hear that further and further. I don't know if or when there would be commercial application. That is up to the minister to determine. And at this point, I must say that that's the Minister of Health. The jurisdiction of hemp right now is under the Minister of Health. Ongoing research continues, and at this point it is from privately funded operations. There have been, I suppose, some funding indirectly in that Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has allowed time of personnel. But from a dollar point of view, if you really wanted to get a set amount of dollars to do some research specifically, there have been some privately funded research in the past. One quickly comes to mind in Ontario, of course, where the Tobacco Growers Association has put in some money because they are looking at alternate crops. Of course, tobacco has, how do I put it, not looked on favorably in the last few years, and so they're looking for an alternate. There are also agronomic considerations to take into account, and the economic considerations, and I'm going to talk about the economic considerations a little bit in a lot more detail in a little bit further on, so I'll just leave it at that. I don't put timelines anymore in that I say in 1995 or in 1996. What we've done is we've just said in the next 6 to 18 months, because this allows us to have a sliding scale. We have received a phenomenal amount of requests about information, people asking about regulations and regulatory reform. We've been redirecting those to the appropriate authorities. But we also have to see more involvement, I believe, and I'm speaking from a personal point at this statement, that it's government, public business, and from academia as well. And we are seeing that, actually. For example, the Manitoba Department of Agriculture is involved in the research. We had researchers from the University of Saskatoon, last year that were working on it. Ken Domeyer from the University of Alberta. So, and obviously we're getting more public support as well. We can see that just by the displays that are outside the foyer, or in the foyer out here, what can be done with refined products. Key factors in working with hemp. Anybody that's investing money obviously wants to see some long-term commitment. Some of the concern that industry has voiced is the fact that, well, if I invest 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, whatever the dollar value may be, I would like to, or at least they would hope to have some firm commitment that the law isn't going to change at some point and negate all of their work and all their financial investment. In addition, people have been expressing a concern for an influx of required capital. And again, I'm going to emphasize that in some of the economic numbers that I will be putting up on the screen in a little bit. And as well, regional diversification is a key item, especially with the way the agricultural communities are changing because of the changing in subsidies and reductions, and also some crops falling from favor. Now I'm going to put up here some of the economic analysis, and what I have done, I've used an example actually out of Saskatchewan in the dark brown soil zone, and I'm also going to be addressing conventional stubble seeding. Obviously these numbers can change, and also the yield you'll be seeing could change if I was using fallow field versus the conventional stubble, or even if I was working on a light brown versus a dark brown, or even a sandy soil. For those of you that are from Manitoba, Manitoba Department of Agriculture puts out a document which has the estimated costs of production. Inside this particular document, it has essentially most of the crops that are common to Manitoba, and you can quite easily go through and put in the numbers that are specific to your farming operation. As I'd mentioned, I'm using an example from Saskatchewan, and I keep emphasizing this because as I was looking between the provinces, there were some notable differences in inputs. Primarily, for instance, the canola you'll see when I put up here, I've got the seed at $5.50 an acre. In Manitoba, they have an estimate of $13 an acre. So if you disagree with some of these numbers, great. I have no problem with that at all. Get one of these if you can. I'll have it here if you'd like, or you can just write the departments, the specific departments, and you can get one of these. Put your numbers in that are specific to your operation, and you'll be able to come up with these numbers, and you'll have your assessment. Now, these particular numbers, as I had mentioned, they're for 1996. They're estimates. It's a dollar value per acre. I'm just going to pull this down so everybody doesn't rush to the bottom portion. No, I'll do it this way. Okay. Two predominant crops in Western Canada, obviously, the spring wheat and canola. I went through each one of these. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about each of the specific portions, but I would like to emphasize a few things. One, the amount of fertilizer that's being used here for the hemp itself is equivalent to what they're fertilizing their wheat crop. That may or may not be the case depending on the soil condition or the location, but again, bear in mind that this can vary from region to region. The same thing holds true here for the canola, but these values fluctuate. And I want to keep pointing out that this is conventionally seeded stubble, and you'll see why, and I'll point that out just a bit later. But total cash that's required for operating for wheat, roughly $73 an acre. Canola, a little bit more, at about $80. But hemp, we're looking at nearly $200 an acre, and that primarily is because of the cost of seed. I have used, in this particular estimate, a cost of $5,400 per ton of hemp seed. That's landed in Winnipeg. And that comes out to about $107, I think, per bushel. And then, of course, we go on to the non-cash costs. that, of course, vary from farm to farm, and if they apply or don't apply, you may have buildings on a particular piece of land or you may not. But from there, you can work these numbers accordingly. Hemp, as it turns out, is almost double that of the inputs that are required for either spring wheat or for canola. Well, that still doesn't negate the fact that, well, it may cost twice as much, but if a person can get 2 or 3 times what you get for your other crop, people will certainly run the risk on that. And what I've done here is gone the step further. Again, I've used the estimates from the Saskatchewan Department of Agriculture on what they feel that you could get for a farm gate price for wheat on a bushel basis, and also for the average yield. This makes a big difference because this particular reference is on summer fallow, or pardon me, is on stubble. And you'll note here that the yield for canola is considerably lower than what you would find on fallow. Fallow number, I believe, was about 22 bushel per acre. So that would add almost another, well, if we had another 10 roughly, you'd have about another $70 or $75 that you could add to your bottom line if you were working this on a summer fallow crop. The numbers, I would like to caution you about this particular region, because this obviously is not return to the farmer. These numbers are. These numbers over here I've put on there to draw attention to the fact that in some cases you'll lose money right here if, for what I've been able to find, and I've taken the value for the product, that's a value added product, and I've used that as a farm gate price. Now, I know under normal circumstances, in fact under any circumstances, you really shouldn't do that, but because there's no infrastructure in place, there are no economic analysis that I've seen anyway, or that anybody has been willing to put on the table that I could compare numbers to, that I would be able to reference. So I have gone this route to answer the question that, is there any money left over at the end of the day using minimum prices, minimum yield, and the range, conversely, maximum prices, maximum yield, and what would be the return? To answer this specific question, and that is there enough money per acre to support an infrastructure that would be able to do the value-added processing, allow the entrepreneurs or the marketers to sell the product, make profit, and yet still leave enough money around to pay the farmers so that they can earn a respectable living. And I don't think that we would be able to deny anybody that particular fact. Everybody would like to make a respectable living. And that's what these numbers are. So we really jump from one side to the other, and I really want to caution you about these numbers so that they're not taken out of context.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
What portion of the hemp crop are you evaluating?
Sorry. This particular reference is just hemp for the stalk alone. And I talked to people from the fiberboard industry. Well, this was about a year ago that I've used these numbers, so that if you people here have numbers that you would like to see revised or updated, I'd certainly be welcome to receive those. But there again, and I'll summarize these later on, but I'll just take them one step at a time as we go through. That's the just growing hemp just purely for stock. Now, I took a lot of time going through the spring wheat and canola. I'm not going to address it anymore because these numbers for canola and wheat are the same. So we'll just go straight over to hemp for fiber. And that's the fiber that people in the clothing or the textile industry would be looking at to make the clothing from it. Again, we run through the numbers. We've got our minimum, our maximum price, dollars per pound, and the yield that I've been able to find here on pounds per acre with our return on an acre basis. Certainly this is not what the farmer would get at the farm, but it begs the question again, is that sufficient to support an infrastructure to do the analysis? Take a look at hemp for herds. Herds, of course, have a multitude of uses. As Jack had mentioned, the royal ponies love to bed down on it. In this particular case, the price that I could find talking to various people in other countries on this, I'm just going to slide it up so that, but again, we're looking at a seeding rate of about 60, I think it's 62 kilos per acre. Hold it, hectare. Thank you. 62 kilos per hectare, which comes out to about $136 acre on an acre basis. We take the minimum and the maximum price along with the min-max range that I've been able to establish from the literature on yields, and again we have a price. And I'll keep saying this every time I put one of these things up. The question that begs to be answered is, can that dollar value per acre support everybody from the farmer through to the marketer? I broke these down into the various components because of that first overhead that you saw, where each one of those were broken down into the fibers, the herds, and also into the seed for oil. In this particular example, hemp for seed, the density is obviously much lower because for seed you want to have a sparser population so that you get more seed per area, as opposed to the fiber where you seed them very densely. The dollar value again, if we take an estimated range, what based on the dollar value per ton of seed right now is $5,400 FOB Winnipeg. For seed, if you're wishing to put it into the ground, I've just estimated here, talking to various seed suppliers in Canada, if what would be a reasonable or exciting value, I suppose, for them to charge on a per pound basis, and what would that return to a certified seed grower. And there, again, is a range between $200 and almost $300 to $800 range. I've used a seed, well, there's the pounds per acre that you get for the yield. But again, the question that begs to be answered is that a sufficient dollar range to support the infrastructure required to pay everybody in that entire sequence? I just noticed that this next one was supposed to be hemp for seed for the edible aspect. I actually duplicated the other overhead, so we'll skip that one since I don't have it. But instead we'll just do a summary. We've gone through the different aspects of it. Spring wheat, what's your return over your cash crops based on estimates, your return over all costs, taking into account your building, your depreciation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I've just said, all right, we've got our fiber, our herds, seed, and raw stock. Depending on what particular application you want to use it, the prices will vary, and so do the yields. If you're growing it specifically for herds, with today's values, it appears though, and by no means is this the definitive answer, but just off of the very quick analysis, it appears though that, well, you really wouldn't want to grow it for herds at this point, unless of course you can get someone that would agree to pay a higher price for it than what I've got in these numbers. That's using high cost of seed at $5,400 a ton, a minimum yield, all right? Because it does happen. We do have droughts, we do have pests that love to eat specific crops, etc. The other thing is, all right, let's use the high cost of seed, $5,400 a ton, and a maximum yield, and would you be able to still generate a sufficient dollar return per acre to support the industry or an infrastructure that's required? Because the infrastructure in Canada is essentially non-existent. That's just a simple fact of neglect for the past 60 years. It's just gone. More realistically, let's just take the average yield and the average price, and again, would this beg the question, looking at them independently, would that be enough money? And I know it's going to sound like a broken record, but these are questions that have to be asked, and farmers have asked this very point very bluntly. Why should I grow a crop if I can't make any money? It doesn't matter how much hype is behind it. If I can get a gross of $10,000 an acre and it costs me $20,000 to produce it, there's no sense in even pursuing it from their point, unless the market is willing to compensate them in order to return those economics, or turn the economics around so that it is favorable. Each one of these is taken independently. Now, in some situations, you can grow the crop so that you may be able to grow it for seed purposes, yet still use the ag residue, I'll call it that, the stock itself, for alternate options, pulp and paper. You may be able to make fiberboard from it, various other options, and you may be able to add some of these and come up with a cumulative number. There again, that still requires additional work, and people need to address those kinds of questions. I'm a bit of, well, I'm a scientist. I like to see facts. I can take all the information that people will give me, and I'll listen to them and say that's fine, but any claim that's made, I want to see the facts. Show me the numbers, because from that point we can then proceed to determine whether this is going to be viable from the farmer to the marketer. Let me just sum up here then. That obviously we have some challenges and opportunities before us. The one that I had mentioned previously is the non-existent infrastructure, and that's why I keep coming back, that somewhere private industry has said, yes, this is a great idea. I've heard it from them. Private industry has also said, and I've heard it from them, that there are investors willing to look at it if the economics are there. And unfortunately, I haven't seen a lot of economic analysis done. I've seen something like I've done, and by no means is this an in-depth economic analysis. That's not the kind of analysis that I'm referring to. I'd like to see something that from industry or from anybody, from a research point of view for that matter, that would be able to take it down, figure out the trucking costs, the cutting costs, if you had to buy harvesting equipment, if you had to put in a decortication facility, all the way through. And there's a myriad of options available, and that's the kind of analysis that I think we need to take a look at, or at least have put on the table. There's also an opportunity for a transfer of technology. We've had our distinguished guests obviously have equipment that they are certainly willing to discuss. There's potential there. Farm implement manufacturers, as Jack had mentioned, some engineers are certainly keen and eager to build a machine if they can build it for a cost that will allow a profit to the farmers. And essentially what that allows us to do then is open up an invitation to everybody to work cooperatively on this, because the way it has progressed to date, it's been through hard cooperative efforts from everybody here that you can see and around the world, essentially, that's represented by symposiums such as this. Thank you. Sure.
Thanks, Gordon.
I turned it off.
Thanks, Gordon. That was interesting. Does anybody have any questions for Gordon? He's as good a numbers guy as we have for this topic now.
I'd just like to know what your personal opinion is. What your answer to the question is it, can it be viable? Especially if you add up you can harvest the herds, the seeds, and the fiber from the same plantations. So have you considered that?
I broke it down into the separate components because, first of all, I wanted to know at what is the lowest common denominator that you could use. I haven't taken it to a step further where I've been able to say, all right, if we're going to grow it for seed and for fiber both, that obviously if you've taken it to the seed, your fiber is going to be lignified in a lower grade, and as a result, lower prices for that. I haven't taken it to that. I've been encouraging anybody out there that would like to do that so that we could get other numbers on the table.
I would like to ask you this clarification on the number. You mentioned that there is that you establish a price for ton of seeds in Manitoba for $5,400.
Right.
I would really appreciate the contact.
I take it you have seed that you'd like to sell. Okay, the price that I came up there with, I had been talking to various people about the costs of seed. I originally had $2,700 in there, and
May I add something?
sure.
I think that there is one problem. Sowing seeds or seeds for processing is a big difference. Sowing seeds, first,
Yes.
yes, they are maybe more expensive.
Yes.
But for processing is a problem of conjuncture, situation, and quick response. Now is, I think, a tremendous ability. Everybody interested in the hemp product, and it's just good opportunity to have a good prices. But we have to know, I can tell you is my experience with a flax 3-4 years ago. We have an excellent conjuncture for flax. And last year it is completely collapsed. And the price of fiber, price of seed is going down. And the producer, especially farmers or organization of producer, they have tremendous problems how they can keep their economy right. It's a problem with the market and quick response. And I think that this prepared by him, this chart are very good because they give you a different possibility of opportunity to find a specialization, because in hemp production it's very important to find specialization. What do we want to do? Hemp for seeds, for food, etc., for cosmetic, or fiber, excellent fiber for textile. But everybody probably know now that is even we say textile sector is only about, I think, the best profit for about 20-30% for textile. But the better profit is for new possibilities of application of fibers. As we will be talking later about composite materials, etc., isolation, and especially eco materials, especially inside. You know, it's a big problem everywhere is carpet, nylon carpet and polyester carpet. They make allergy, etc. And quick response, make excellent rugs, excellent carpet or basic hemp. I think so. Thank you.
One other thing I'd like to put in too about the combining of various options. For instance, if you had someone producing seed that is going to be used for pressing, and the economics behind that have been taken into account that they are going to take the stock or the ag residue and make another product with it, whether it be paper or particle board or whatever. And it takes both of those to make it economically viable, and the bottom falls out of the seed market, then you put at risk the other infrastructure that you've got in place for making the other components, if they are both dependent on one another. And so we have to be extremely careful on developing that kind of a market.
I just wanted to ask you, Gordon, what yields did you find in terms of seed in your research literature? What sort of seed yields per acre could we expect in Manitoba if we grew hemp for the seed crop?
I've been using 400 pounds per acre because of some of the information that I found going back through 1923 that the Dominion of Canada at that point was doing research. And the research was also done in Ottawa and out here in Manitoba as well. So that's the number that I've been using.
And of the 400 pounds, what of the seed? How much of that is oil?
I haven't been able to find any oil analysis based on the yield that was given for those dates, but literature that's been more recent literature, obviously, mainly out of Europe, Eastern Europe, the range can be from 25 to 35% oil by weight.
So, what as
Comment on this.
Yeah.
as an oilseed crop, given certain mathematics involved in that?
You want to know what the dollar value per acre is?
It's just let's throw a number out there to shoot at and see if we're high or low.
I thought it was fortuitous that I had actually duplicated the one slide twice, because that one is the one that always generates the most enthusiasm. From my mind, just from recollection, and the calculation based on 400 pounds per acre with a yield of 30% for oil, or 33 actually, for oil, and based on a price of 125 US per US gallon. And I just saw a recent article out of Germany that said 60 Deutschmark per liter. The Deutschmark is very close to the Canadian dollar. Putting all of that together, it actually came into several $1,000s per acre.
Any
Now,
questions about that?
hold it. The question that begs to be answered, is that a sufficient dollar value per acre to support an infrastructure? And
So I just want to also add, when you crush the oil out of the seed, you still have leftover protein meal that you could sell off to.
Yes, but-
and you still have stock that you could chip up and sell it cheap for extra added value on the. Is that correct?
yes, but very quickly, I must say. The concern with the oil crushing industry right now is that what scale do you look at? I mean, a crushing facility can cost you millions of dollars. Or, for instance, Don, you have a small scale press. But if, let's say, a cosmetic industry wanted to use oil, and we have, I'm just picking a number, I don't know what the oil volume is in North America right now, but let's assume 1,000 gallons. And we've got 125 US per US gallon, but what happens if we produce 100,000 gallons or 200,000 gallons of oil? Obviously, the price is not going to remain at the elevated region. It's going to drop to a level where industry determines the price. And then again, we have to do the analysis so that we can answer the question that I won't repeat.
Anyone else?
Jack?
I guess similar qualifications go. This is more comment than question, but in terms of the seed price of over $5,000 per ton that you use, that assumes the prices as they currently are,
Yes.
based on what we know, plus the cost of shipping that seed from where it is over to here.
Yes.
And what we would anticipate is a situation where, assuming that we use varieties, say they're sourced in Eastern Europe, hopefully we can still do seed production under a negotiated agreement locally, and that will mean that the cost of the seed will not be that $5,000 a ton, but presumably something less than that.
Yes.
Is it for seeding?
That would be for
Yes,
sowing
seed.
material.
Certified seed.
Certified seed. We're talking about seed that is guaranteed in terms of its pedigree. Yeah.
Sorry, I comment something. You know, the problem, even when we discuss about varieties, species, if you're growing different varieties and try and make experiment with hemp, you don't have to forget the distance between one small field to another have be rather few kilometers. If you growing very quick, very near this experimental field, you have forget about varieties of first class of sowing materials. It's a problem. Yes, it's a problem. And coming back to the seed, I think that you're thinking about oil, about the cold pressing. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because the yield of oil is higher than you use next extraction or hot pressing, and in hot pressing and extraction you can obtain the yield about 35 even to 40. It depends about quality of seeds. It's a problem, but it's another problem. You know, the quality of the seed for food production and for processing. I think that we'll be talking in our lecture later about it. Is there some problem, especially in Europe, in industrial zone, where it's don't solve up to now, because it's in pollution, especially by heavy metals.
I have a question. You're living here in Winnipeg, you work for the federal government, and Jack Mose is working for the provincial government. What is the interest in Ottawa, and are you on assignment to do this? What's your portfolio, so to speak? And what department, you're with agriculture, but what linkage do you have with the health department?
I have linkage through the health department by being a federal employee. I work for the market analysis division in Winnipeg here for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And there's also 6 other levels of description that go in there, but that's the basic area, market analysis. I got involved in this because of the biweekly bulletin that was written. And as I said earlier, no one, my supervisors who had agreed to let me write the article and all the people that had to approve it, did not anticipate the response. And because of the response that was generated, it was obvious that we just couldn't ignore the requests that were coming in. So we started responding to them, which again then just increased the response, and so it's just continually gone. However, Nicole Charest, who is sitting over there, is a counterpart in Ottawa, and Nicole has, just as of late, essentially taken over, I would say, the coordination within government to bring in various, like the market analysis division perhaps, the research, etc. I won't put words in your mouth, Nicole, but Nicole is essentially coordinating that aspect of it. So there is progress, although not obvious maybe on the outside, but there is progress that is coming together within the government. And perhaps, Nicole, you'd like to further comment.
So my name is Nicole Charest. I'm the new coordinator for the hemp issues. It's not the only things I'm doing. It's the government is not, and when I'm talking about government, is Agriculture Canada is not that far to have numerous full-time employees on hemp. Don't forget that hemp is still an illegal crop in Canada. The reason why there is an officer like me in Ottawa, it's because there is a lot of requests. And we have to be able to answer these requests. Gordon has stimulated a lot of interest, but when he is talking and when he is presenting his thing, he's like a research scientist presenting his own work. He is not talking for the Minister of Agriculture. You have to understand that. And my role is to coordinate this talk between within our department to make sure that we can pull together all the knowledge available in Agriculture Canada to work in a coordinated approach on hemp and other crops. And we are not the department responsible for the legal status or not of hemp. It's Health Canada. Okay, what's the situation now with Health Canada? You know that there is a current act, which is an Arctic Act, and under this act, the only possibility to grow hemp is for research purposes. And again, when you grow that for research purposes, it's just to enrich your mind in terms of knowledge, is to get first familiarization with the crop, but you're not going to put anything in your pocket. You're going to take a lot of things in your pocket and your time. Okay, don't forget that. And what is the future now in terms of act and laws and possibilities? Okay, probably everybody who has interest in hemp knows that there is a bill so-called C7. This bill, yes, just a second. This bill, if it's not his purpose is not to whether or not we grow hemp in Canada. The purpose of this hemp is to this act or bill is to